Hi, so welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to be here today with Peilin and Bill, and they're here on behalf of their co-authors, Jiyoung, Nicole, and Rachel, and they're talking more about their recently accepted article, and published article actually, does childhood exposure to a brand improve brand name recognition? And so we're super excited to hear more about your article, your findings, and what went on behind the scenes with the article as well too. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, pleasure to be here as well.
Awesome. So just start us off, I'm going to go through the first question, which is, can you tell us more about your article and its findings?
All right, so I will kick this off with just giving everyone an overview of the article. So the title is pretty descriptive, as Colleen has pointed out. So we tested if age of acquisition, which refers to the age when someone learn about the brand. So we tested if brands that people learn during childhood had any advantage in the memories compared to brands that people learn in adulthood. So we adopted the age of acquisition effects, which is known in the psychology and linguistic studies mainly, that words, concepts learned before the age of about 4 or 5 are recognized more accurately and quickly than later learned ones. As mentioned, most of the work's done in psychology and linguistic studies. So we only found one paper that extended this into consumer buying behavior or consumer learning. So this paper was published by Ellis and his colleagues in 2010 in the Journal of Consumer Psychology. And we decided to extend this. We thought it's very interesting that they found, they exist, the age of acquisition actually exists in brand name recognition. And we thought it's very interesting. And we noted that, as all studies, there's always limitation and opportunity to build on and expand our knowledge. So we know that recent experiences can influence memory massively. So we replicated and extended to test recent brand usage as well as advertising exposure. So replicating it with the recognition test, we use keyboard as input to collect people's accuracy in identifying if a brand name is correctly recognized or not, and we also collect their reaction time. We test a bunch of brands from different consumer goods categories, from a range of different introduction years, and with a much larger group of sample, we got 1,000 respondents. So long story short, our findings replicated the original study by Ellis and colleagues, where we found a small, effects of age of acquisition and brands that was introduced before the participant, less than when the participant was 4 years old. It was slightly faster and more accurately to identify the brand was real. So the actual effect size is actually only 14 millisecond difference, which is very tiny. It's 0.014 second of a difference. So really small, even though it's statistically significant, the effect size is tiny. And for accuracy, it's very small as well, only 2%, advantage for early learn brands. So we do see some, childhood exposure could potentially influence consumer memories, but other factors like recent experience that we have tested has significantly outweighed the memory, in a way, the consumer memory fluency. And especially this becomes more important as consumers enter adulthood, and in like consumer goods or most brands in today's market, that's very competitive environment. So things that people keep learning things, childhood learning might have some influence, but there are other things that come into play. So that was our primary finding that we set out to uncover. We also had an incidental finding as well that's related to method about the actual reaction time. So we actually found that incorrect responses were always faster than correct responses. And Bill will discuss a little bit more about this. very curly and messy things that we have, faced during our research. He will touch on some of the challenges and the implications of measuring reaction time, especially in a branding context.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a
Yeah. Do you
looking
want to
at
dive into
the.
that now, Bill, or yeah?
I was just wondering because we've got the questions in this order, and it was like, oh,
Let's
this is
jump to it. I think
interesting.
it makes sense. Let's float it out.
Should we
Yeah.
jump all the way down to number
Let's
4?
jump all the way down. Yeah.
What challenges did we run into this article? Glad you asked. So, age of acquisition effects, they exist, right? But they're so weak. Um, and being researchers and scientists, we were looking at it more closely, trying to work out, well, what is actually going on here? The age of the psychologists essentially used a cutoff of 4 years. If you learned it before 4 or after 4, that was when they cut it off, which might make sense for linguistics research, but it's, when we're talking about brands, it's not like all of a sudden people know stuff before or after the age of 4. So we decided, well, what about if we is there another way of analyzing the data? Instead of just having 2 buckets, can we, using the power of computers, spread it out a bit and actually look and see, well, what should the cutoff be? What cutoff do we want? So we rejigged it all so that instead of being that cutoff, we reset everything to 0. So when people were, we had it so it was their age at the brand launch. So if you were, if the brand came out 50 years before you were born, it got set to -50. If you were 4 when the brand came out, it got set to 4. And that was kind of cool because it meant that we could see, what that shape looked like. If you've got the paper in front of you, it's figure 1, and it's this sort of it's pretty much flat up until they reach age 0 and then starts to taper off. People get less accurate at recognizing brands just slightly up until it just starts to decline. But is that also just like old people are worse at things?
Up until which point was it? Sorry, or what did they?
It
What
just
did it?
continues to decline. So
Oh,
it's
just basically from when it starts. Yeah.
yeah, from a brand launched when you were born, you
Mhm.
have, or before you were born, you have the greatest accuracy at recognizing. And then after that, it starts to decline to about sort of like 50% accuracy, 40-50% accuracy. There's no hard line on that because obviously we're dealing with, averages and people and all the different things that factor into how much confidence we have in any of these numbers. So in terms of accuracy, there is a very slight effect that if you're lucky enough to have a brand that came out before people were born, that's good. But it's also a bit difficult for us to then go and say, great, marketers, we've got it figured out. All you need to do is go back in time and launch your brand a long time ago. Perfect. Science has the answers. And so, we had that accuracy finding and we were like, all right, okay, we've got that. Let's take a look at the speed of responses. Let's use this same approach to look at how quickly people responded. But we were also worried with this that so the original paper was done only on, college students, whereas we did a much larger sample and representative of the population because, why not? We live in the future, we can do these things. But of course, old people, you would think, are going to be slower than young people, or just some people react faster and some people react slower. So we used an approach that I'd seen in a different paper on a totally different topic about music and nostalgia. Super interesting, where we standardized the speed of response for each individual. So we stretched and squashed the distributions so that 0 was the average response time for each individual, and it went up to plus and minus 1. Which was a good way of comparing everyone, based on, well, how quick are they to respond? And it also means that, if they're using like a Bluetooth keyboard or their internet speed is whatever, it sort of irons all that stuff out. And then, we map it all out with the correct and incorrect responses and go, oh, Peilin, I think I've got it wrong. Can you check what I've done? Because all the incorrect responses were way faster. And it just seemed totally wrong. And, surely, if these things have a positive effect, if we're looking for people responding faster, then why would we want them to be incorrect and faster? It starts to tie your mind in knots when you're knee deep in the data. And so I showed it to my wife, who's a psychologist, and said immediately, oh, that's obvious. They're just two different processes. And I go, what? What do you mean they're two different processes? Oh, well, one of them would be recall or recognition, which is a slow process. And the other one is probably guessing. Oh, all right, great. Thanks for that. And, to me, it's a big red flag going, you guys are not psychologists, you're marketers. And then also for the psychologists, they're psychologists, not marketers. And so these two things, while they seem very related, there's a whole lot of knowledge there that isn't going across the two. So imagine that we've got, a cloud of dots, half of them showing incorrect responses and half of them showing correct responses. And we see that all those incorrect responses are slightly faster. We do actually see that the correct responses that are slightly slower do get faster, but they get faster only for people who are older, above their late teens, essentially, which is really confusing, right? Because you would expect that they would be faster to recall brands that they were more accurate at. But instead, they're faster to recall brands they're less accurate at. So if we're using time to respond or time to recall as a measure, it's inside out, right? It doesn't matter if they're faster, if they're less accurate. If they're not actually able to tell us if it's right or not, who cares if they're quicker? So I think what was happening here was that people were using that guessing response, and so using that mental process, which was making it faster for them, but then it also meant that they were less likely to be accurate. So using time to respond as a measure of anything in marketing gets super confusing and not necessarily testing the mental processes we imagine that it's testing. Obviously we went back and tried to read more literature about it. And one of the things which is, widely known is the list length effect, that people, memory isn't, when you ask people to recall things from a list, the time to respond doesn't have anything to do with what is on the list or if they get it right or wrong. It's how long that list is. Because it's as if people aren't searching through each individual item in a list. You might imagine that human memory works as if people have written things down on a list and they check through one by one and stop once they've got an answer.
We're not that ordered.
No, God, no. It's as if you have to search the entire network all at once and say, is it on everything or is it not there at all? And then when you get back that response of, yeah, it's on something, it took longer because you had to search the entire list. I'm just thinking about it now, and I assume most people by now have had a go on ChatGPT. And I love it when you get an answer that's slow, because you've stumped it. You go, this was a hard question. I'm glad I asked the AI. Whereas when it's a quick response, it's because there's less that it needs to search through. And so it's the same with humans, where when there's a neural network that needs searching, it's the size of the network that matters. So for individuals, when we're asking them about brands, we don't know how big each of the lists are for people. So each individual might have a completely different list of brands that they're searching. And I mean, they absolutely do. And so that's interfering with the speed of response as well.
Yeah.
So
you'd expect as you get older, you're going to have a bigger list as well too, right? As we learn more and more brands too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So and as we have more experience with the category, so if you're new to the category, you probably have a smaller list. And so there's all of these different things that are confounding measurement of time to respond that basically mean it's probably a really bad idea to start using it for any marketing work at all. Which is
should we trust your findings then? Like bring it back to what you found. I mean, like it sounds like you were still able to find some cool stuff despite the fact that you did encounter those challenges.
Well, it's hard to know, right? I think the accuracy numbers, yeah, well, that's useful. Knowing, well, is it? I'm not sure it's interesting.
The brand usage effect is prominent, which is discussed in the paper as well. That we do see brand users are significantly more accurate at recognizing the brands that they know and they use, and they are actually slower at correctly recognizing. So again, it kind of support that notion that memory, like when we recognize something, that is actually like our memory is going through some sort of process to recognize something that is in there versus guessing, which is like, yeah, no, that's not on the list. It's very quick in, responding to that.
Interesting. So to translate this for advertisers, then what do you think are the key kind of takeaways for them? Like,
Well, I
So,
suppose
yep,
you go.
yep, you can go. You want to go? Yeah.
I suppose it's use a measure that represents what you're actually looking for. Don't fall into the trap of going, well, those people are wearing white coats and they've got scientist name badges and they're all wearing glasses. So trust the science. Let's get as sciencey as possible. Just because something sounds cool doesn't mean it's useful. Measure what you're actually interested in. So, if you are, I've been thinking about share of search a lot recently. How useful a measure is that? And if you're trying to drive people to search for something, then it's very useful. But if you're trying to drive people to buy stuff off a shelf, it's probably not useful. So in terms of advertising, if you're trying to see if people can recognize the brand, find that out. Mask the brand and ask people what brand it's for. Don't get into pseudoscientific, although it's slightly faster to recognize this, it probably means that, who knows what it means, to be honest. Ask the questions about what questions am I asking in the first place, and how does that relate to the memory structures that we're trying to build.
cool. Anything you wanted to add in, Peilin, or?
In terms of, we're going back to our main research topic that we wanted to find out about on early learn brands and versus brands that people learn during adulthood. What does this all mean for advertisers? So it really does means that brands do not need to try and get in early, like, get them while they are young, reaching people who are, younger or teens. Instead, reaching people who are closer to buying is actually far more effective. This also means that brands, long-standing brands, brands that has existed for a long time, may have the advantage over, newly launched brands, memory advantage, but this advantage is not permanent. Advertising via high reach media with clear and easily recognizable branding is important, as well as ensuring consistency in protecting the brand's legacy. So, for advertisers, continuous brand enforcement through advertising, and one way to extend this early learn advantage is to consistently and keeping the same elements, the similar brand attributes across all touch points, which can help leverage consumers, brand related memories and also capture their attention. So this also means that, do not change your logo or even brand name without good reasons.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I like that. You're reinforcing, that idea of like really the importance of brand equity. But it's interesting you say like there's not much of an advantage. I guess it's looking at the effect size. It's not that big, right? So there's not much value in that early targeting. But even though the effect's there, it's just not that big, right?
Yeah. But there's so many other things that come into play. Age of acquisition. It also might mean that the brand has been around for longer. They might have the history to build that market share, and more likely, people might have seen it, during their childhood. Their parents were using it, could see in the pantry, and if they are, long-standing brand with larger market share, you're also more likely to, walk past them on the shelf, see them on aisle and come across advertising as well. So that's just, that's a fact.
That's interesting. It made me think about like, potentially there's more value in like brand extensions then. If you can go through and leverage that existing brand equity, right? This is perhaps what your research kind of reinforces that.
Yes.
Another one that I don't know, like I've just been thinking a lot about generative AI the last like year, as I'm sure we all have, right? is copycats. And I just wonder, like, does this suggest that there's value? What do you think about this in going through and, copying the logo or name? To some extent, like you can't do 100%, obviously, for legal reasons, but you can get kind of close, right? Is there value in that? Do you think people, if they think that they kind of might know it, they might look a bit
Yeah.
more?
I'd say so. It'll at the very least, it'll make people more likely to notice it on the shelf, surely. If you've trained people's, if someone else has put all the hard work into training people, this is what a packet of biscuits looks like, then if you are very similar to that packet of biscuits, you're more likely to be picked up, surely, surely. Yeah, and including using colors and that kind of thing that people have been learning over a long period of time. It seems to make sense that if you can communicate with people in a shortcutting kind of way rather than expecting people to read at shelf, then you should probably take advantage of it. Oh,
Interesting.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going back on what I'm thinking is that by doing that, surely you would be giving up the opportunity to build your own mental availability for your
That's
own,
true.
that you would really want to be sure that you're putting your efforts behind a brand leader who will always be the brand leader and you never want to be the brand leader is an interesting opportunity.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely a second mover kind of strategy. Yeah.
Mm.
Big time.
Yeah. Where to next, right? For people, either yourselves or people who are interested in the space, where do you think the next kind of big questions are around what you've been researching?
Well, it's a tough one, right? Because kind of what we found was, well, it doesn't really matter. It feels like a bit of a dead end. It's what we could do. One thing we were interested in was, what about if we did it again, but asked people after each response how confident they were in it, rather than just doing a straight up replication, assuming the psychologists know what they're doing, and saying, well, what about how many of them were a guess? It probably, I don't know how much use that would be to marketers, and we're very focused on making sure that the research we do comes out with something useful, but it could be quite a useful or quite an interesting, just who knows what might come from that.
It's more like a method.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
method
Yeah.
paper would be, yeah.
yeah.
It was just super valuable, like knowing what works and what doesn't work. So work is always important. And also like getting more insight on how to use these different methods as well too is always important. Do you think there's a different method that might have been better? Like, is there something you wish you could go back and do differently?
Oh, I think, yeah, just that bit there, like asking about guessing. If we had $1 bajillion, putting everyone in a lab and doing it, actually getting to time them properly rather than doing it online. Maybe even prompting with the category. Peilin was talking about this earlier, with if we prompted by category, then we would have some idea of
The
the
network
length of the
size.
list.
Yeah.
If we could try and control for the length of the list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, the reaction time is so small, like the difference is so small. And the fact that we do see accurate responses slower than inaccurate, that's, yeah, because some of research services that we've seen, they try to capture reaction time, how quickly can, consumers recognize, a brand's logo or a brand's pack. It's a little bit of, so you can say, let me think about this. Let me think about my thoughts. So it's, how reliable, how useful is that reaction time measurement? I think like Bill has mentioned this as well. If you really want to, see how if people can recognize the pack, just measure the accuracy. That is a very good measurement already. What's the percentage of people can, recognize this pack, and then versus, I don't know, like a new pack, can people still relate, can people still associate it to the brand that you want? So you can do different experiments to test okay, if people can still associate a new pack design to our brand, maybe that's okay. We can, go ahead with that. Reaction time, maybe, it might have a place somewhere, but in terms of branding context, I think it's still very messy. And people, if they want to use that as a measurement, they have to be very careful and not read too much into it. That's
Or
our main
ideally,
message.
read your article and save a whole bunch of time. That could be better for them. Yeah.
I think the one place where I've seen that I'm still not sure where it could be useful in terms of measuring the time it takes for someone to recognize might be shelf tests. And I'm still turning all this over in my head. So I'll probably come back with a different answer if you ask me tomorrow. But it seems like maybe seeing how long it takes someone to find your new pack at shelf. And if it's faster than the old pack, then that seems like it would be good. But always testing against the no change condition. For a pack test.
Yeah.
Like, should we change our pack or not? Probably not. But maybe you can do some magic and get a pack that performs better. I haven't heard of many, but maybe you could use comparing how long it takes people to find the new pack versus the old pack, like accuracy and time could be useful. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a total skeptic.
That's good. Yeah. I'm curious as well too. And you mentioned reading a little bit about this research, and I'm wondering, did that lead to this idea for this paper or this article, or was it something else that led you to sort of come up with this idea and want to examine it? Like, where did that come from? Yeah.
So this comes from some of our global sponsors. So we work at the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute. We talk to our global sponsors quite a bit, and they've got a question, we've got some questions about, is there any value in, targeting specific group, especially the younger consumers? Would targeting them, reaching to them have any benefits for the brand's marketing, further down the track? So this is somehow similar to the notion of saying older people prefer older brands. There's this, ingrained kind of preference that people have, developed over time, or, things that they have seen when they were younger. And it turns out, no, we found that there's research that shows that older people don't necessarily prefer older brands, at least for, fast-moving consumer goods. And that was a paper that was, Bill and I, we co-authored as well, published in Journal of Retailing and Consumer Research Services. And in fact, another research also found that a lack of older consumers usually signal that a brand is in decline. And this was very interesting. So we try to answer our sponsors' question, we searched the literature specific about children and brands. We look into learning psychology, and we come across age of acquisition. And as mentioned, it's mainly in other areas. And then we decided to extend the paper and include things that was missed in that paper, which is the more recent experience.
That's awesome. I love that story. So it started with industry connections. Fantastic. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for both coming on, Peilin and Bill, and sharing more, information about your recent article. For those who are looking for it, again, does childhood exposure to a brand improve brand name recognition? It came out in the December 2023 JAR issue, so you can take a look and find it there. Yeah. Any final thoughts or words you wanted to say? Yeah.
No,
Read our paper.
Thank you. Yeah.
Read the paper. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, read our paper.
Please get in touch. Email us.
Yes.
Ask questions. Send through insult.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love that.
If you got any research ideas, let us know as well. We are curious people.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having us, Colin.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome.